I have to say, I mean, it looks like cold-blooded murder. And I think this is going to cause... I think there are going to be people... Matthew Syed wrote that column before this. I think this is going to shock Americans. I just do. This just looks like they just took a guy out on the street.
Well, back to Sunday papers. Hello to you, John Ryley.
Hi, hello.
Former head of Sky News. And hello to you, Emily Sheffield, former editor of the Evening Standard.
Hello to you.
I read today, is it right the Evening Standard's being bought by The Independent?
No, so what they've done is they're cutting more jobs. So 25 jobs are going to remain, and the weekly Thursday paper is going to be sort of separated off, print only, which I assume Yevgeny Lebedev is going to carry on overseeing, and all digital operations are now going to be run by The Independent, but it is a further loss of some 40 jobs.
Right, well... sad story. We all remember the Evening Standard. Let's go on to Andy Burnham. The Mail on Sunday front page. Starmer is cornered as Andy Burnham throws his hat into the ring. Heated rivalry, says the Observer. Burnham throws down the gauntlet for Starmer, says the Sunday Times. The force is definitely with Andy Burnham. That's the view of Dan Hodges. The Mail on Sunday looks at how Labour's civil war meltdown unfolded, and Jason Cowley, the columnist in the Sunday Times, says Keir Starmer has two options and both are calamitous. John Ryley, what would you do if you were Keir Starmer?
Oh, I'd front it up. I think Burnham's got a very good PR machine behind him. I was talking the other day on Friday to the editor of a Manchester-based local news website, The Mill, and they think the local council in Manchester have been responsible for the transformation of the city, not Andy Burnham. I mean, if you look at Burnham's...
Well, that was Richard Leese and Howard Bernstein.
Yeah, if you look at Burnham's career, he was a fairly unknown health secretary in the dying days of the Labour administration in the run-up to the 2010 election. He was chief secretary to the Treasury before that. Didn't really do anything. He spent 9 years up in Manchester being successful. I think he sees it as his last chance, and the PR may run out.
So as you say, front it up.
Front it up.
Let him run.
Let him run, because if you don't, you're in a mess.
Emily.
Ditto. He's got to front it up. He can't try and stop him from running. I think that will look absolutely terrible when you put that alongside the prevention of the local elections happening in the councils, because 21 of those are Labour councils who've stopped those elections. It will give Reform even more sort of power to say this government is not democratic. And I think he should front it up. I like Andy Burnham personally. I gave him a column in the Evening Standard when I was editor. But I think he's come at this a number of times, and it's always sort of fallen flat on its face. And I think there's another thing that could come in, and I sort of fear for Andy Burnham a bit, because he's giving up a very, very good job as mayor, is that the Greens may beat him. I don't know, for those who might have seen Zach Polanski's video that he's just put out recently, I don't agree with his conclusion, which is just tax the rich. But the video really taps in to what a lot of people are probably feeling in that Manchester area, which is a lot of cost of living problems. So I think for Starmer, he's got to front it up. And I think on a general point for Starmer, he's still talking about too many things. Like, get the barnacles off the boat. There are 3 things the public really care about: immigration, the NHS, and the cost of living. And we just get all these announcements the whole time, which are then sort of U-turned back again. He's got to really focus leading up to these elections on solving those 3 problems.
I mean, the Mail on Sunday call it a plum Labour seat in their headline. It isn't plum. Yes, there's a majority.
No plum Labour.
No plum seat.
I mean, yes, it's a majority for Labour at the last election of just over 13,000. But Reform came second, Green came third, the Tories were fifth. It's going to be a fight, and Reform will really go for it in Manchester Gorton. They'll really go for it because they see a chance to really snub Burnham and snub the Labour Party.
What about the argument of principle from Charles Clarke, which we heard earlier on, simply saying, Labour is in favour of devolution. Everyone agrees, Pacha, your comments recently, that Andy Burnham has been a successful mayor of Manchester, and on principle he ought to be made to serve out his term.
Oh no, I think if he wants to stand, he should be allowed to stand.
I mean, I think it is a real shame for those who voted for Andy Burnham.
Because we did, of course,
Uh,
have Boris Johnson doing both, didn't we? He was Mayor of London and said he would never stand as an MP, and then he did.
What I don't is it seems different. I'm sorry for not having the sort of correct knowledge on this, but it appears that even to run, he has to stand down as mayor. I think that's a bit of a shame. I think he should be allowed to run, and if it fails, he keeps the mayoral race. But I have to say, I feel for the voters who voted him in for another term, because he's effectively pulling out on Manchester, which has given him a really great career and platform.
He would
for
say
the last
not.
9
He's going to be a
years.
Manchester MP, so he's still.
But I think he's heading back down to Westminster.
And it's going to cost a lot of money to hold the election. One paper this morning says it's 5 million, another says it's 1 million. But anyway, it's a lot of money.
Yes, but isn't that Starmer's allies putting that out?
I think that's the second election. That's the one for the vacancy he's created.
Yes, correct.
Where they have to have. Well, so 2 votes there for let him stand. Face him out were interesting, because we're just hearing their prediction that actually the current mood of the people who count on the NEC is to block it. Well, let's move on to Donald Trump. And of course, Donald Trump's been sort of shocking Europeans with his comments at Davos last week, but now the activities of ICE in Minneapolis shooting a second person are in the headlines. I was interested, Emily, Matthew Syed in the Sunday Times, who's been in Florida, possibly with his children on half term, I don't know. But anyway, talking about the Floridians he met, saying that there's still strong support for Donald Trump in spite of everything in Florida, and that people are saying to him, who cares whether he's a liar?
Well, I mean, that is Florida. It's a very strong Republican state. I watched the video this morning of the shooting, and it is really shocking. It is unclear to me whether he did have a gun or not. And you clearly see an officer moving away, which one assumes from what we are being told is this guy's gun, who was a nurse after all. And then you hear these shots being fired, and it's not one shot, it's 4 or 5, and the brutal sort of pushing him to the ground. Now, if he had a gun, one can understand why in America, particularly where everyone have guns, people get killed, you heighten this tension with the police and any kind of sort of gun-carrying force, which ICE is. So you can see there's going to be a lot of fear, which is where you're going to get mistakes. But the ferocity of what you see happening in front of you, and the fact that the one of the ICE officers moves away with a gun, which apparently is the nurse's, and then they shoot him, and they shoot him 5 times while he's lying on the floor. I have to say, I mean, it looks like cold-blooded murder. And I think this is going to cause... I think there are going to be people... Matthew Syed wrote that column before this. I think this is going to shock Americans. I just do. This just looks like they just took a guy out on the streets.
But, John Ryan, I mean, you've been an editor of news organisations where we've obviously dealt with footage shot by other people. I mean, it seems to me that the 2 killings in Minneapolis, clearly the people who were killed, Miss Good and now this victim yesterday, were not posing a threat of life to the people who killed them. And yet we have... the head of Homeland Security, previously the Vice President, all saying, what you see is not the truth. What do you do about it?
Well, I think that the video and the reaction to it speaks to a bigger truth. And it's very clearly the gun is taken away and then the shots run out, killing him, the nurse. The Trump administration is impervious to what people think about it. I don't think the clear evidence of the video will make any difference to the Trump administration in the White House. They will carry on regardless, and they'll argue the toss about what the video shows or doesn't shows. The video, paradoxically, is irrelevant. It's what they believe.
Well, it's also whether people can be held to account. I mean, we had in the previous shooting a declaration that the shooter had full immunity before it happened, and the local police being barred from this inquiry. This time round, we've had Tim Waltz saying that it will be dealt with locally.
I mean, you see it in the same way that Trump on Friday or whatever it was sort of slagged off the contribution of NATO soldiers to the campaign in Afghanistan, and then 24 or 36 hours later changes his tune slightly. Though he doesn't apologise. Changes tune. He is impervious to the truth, and I think that's deeply worrying.
He has changed his tune a bit on the first killing, because they have now softened their language towards her and said it's a tragedy. So that is as far as they're going to go with that. I think this is going to be harder to deal with, because it's so close on the back of the first killing. And then there's a really shocking bit at the end of the video where, having shot him, all the officers just move back. No one's calling the police. No one's trying to save his life. They all just stand there looking really shocked. And I think genuinely this is a real worry in America, because people are armed. This was a nurse who had his own gun. I mean, it's kind of staggering.
That surprised me.
And then this is officers who are being told they're immune from being prosecuted. A lot of them have been recruited incredibly quickly, and we know from our own Met police force, do not recruit quickly and without real safeguards, because you will get people who don't know how to handle, very high tension situations like this, and they look trigger happy.
I have to say, I find one of the most compelling statistics: number of people shot by the forces of law and order in the UK last year, 2. Number of people killed in the United States, 1,200.
Wow.
Just before we leave Donald Trump, Sun front page, John, Trump backed down from claims on UK troops staying back as a result of the concern of King Charles. What do you make of that?
Well, I was reading other versions of that story, and it said Buckingham Palace refused or declined to comment. I'm not entirely sure about that headline, but what I would say, and you know my views on the monarchy, that Charles and Camilla are due to go to America in April. Our king needs to bring it up in the Oval Office and square up to Trump about it. Given the anger that's been expressed, particularly by the relatives of the soldiers who fought in Afghanistan, the king should not let this issue go.
What do you think, Emily?
I think it'd be interesting whether they do or don't. I do, and again, we don't know if this story is actually true, because the Royal Press Office are refusing to comment. I would say that using King Charles in this diplomatic role, if they did do it, was very clever. Do I think King Charles should bring it up in April? Yes. I mean, I think we've got out of President Trump the closest we will ever get to an apology. I was actually surprised on Truth Social how fulsome his U-turn was. So I think he does shoot from the hip a lot. And it was a huge error of judgment, I would say, on his part to say what he did. I'm not entirely sure why he said it. I mean, he does ramble a lot, but that really, to sort of say that basically our soldiers were cowardly, and for him not to have known how many people had died. But I think apart from King Charles, I think the fact that all the parties, Starmer, Badenoch, all the leaders did put a very definitive, very angry, enough is enough, I think was absolutely right. And I think if Starmer had hesitated for a second on that, I think the public would have really turned against him, because there are just some lines, even when we know we have to stay friends with the US, there are some lines you can't allow an ally to cross.
Now, all week, people have been saying to me, ordinary people away from the Westminster bubble, they don't care about Andy Burnham, they don't really care about Donald Trump. What they do care about is the Beckham family.
Yes.
and we, incredibly as it may seem to me, and the Sunday Times, the broadsheets have got involved. Frank Skinner has a column saying he winced when he saw what Brooklyn Beckham said about his parents on Instagram. And then the Sunday Times saying the Beckhams have met their match in the billionaire bully Nelson Peltz, who's now Brooklyn, he's called, isn't he? Brooklyn's father-in-law. Emily, you've actually met the key players here, the Victoria Beckham and Brooklyn. Whose side are you on?
I think I just wanted to bring one sort of observation up from having met Brooklyn many years ago when I was still at Vogue, and we shot him for a Teen Vogue cover, I think, or an inside shot, I can't remember. And he has said that he has sort of suffered from anxiety and shyness for a lot of his life. That does resonate with the young man that I met back then. He was not grand. He was not in your face. He was unbelievably polite, low key. I've always been rather surprised at the sort of pictures I've seen of him in the media and these sort of rather over the top outfits and rather over the top sort of social occasions, because he just didn't strike me as that man. He did strike me as someone who was pretty shy and maybe bordering on fragile. I'm someone who has a very large family. Blow-ups can happen. But I think there is a reason why this story is resonating with so many, is that I think it is a sort of common occurrence in families that when people get married, frictions can happen. And it is a terrible tragedy. And it can happen because one side of the family, the person that you've married, feels threatened by the family of the one they've wed in some way, and that these arguments can escalate in a very, very tragic way. And I would say that nearly always the family of the child, the parents of the child, are trying to protect the child. But it can then become seen as a sort of tug of war between two families over who sees one more. It can happen even in very small instances where if you have a son, and of course this is my fear, that the daughter, whoever they marry, the mother of the daughter will see the grandchildren much more than me. But this is a very, very serious case where then they have now, he's cut off any contact with his parents. So what if there was a dance on the stage that didn't quite resonate? I mean, what? It feels like this has been allowed to blow up like way over proportion. And I think that act of holding a second marriage and not inviting his parents, I think that was a great mistake.
She spoiled his first, you see. I mean,
I just don't believe that.
I have to say,
sorry.
John, looking at this and also looking at Liz Hurley appearing with her son in the court this week, I just have this feeling that mothers really do need to back off from their adult sons a bit.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily a great parent. I let my children make their own decisions, and if they need advice, having screwed it up, I'll come in and help them. But I think after the age of about 18, 19, children need to get on and plough their own furrow. I do feel sorry for Brooklyn. He's got two hugely successful parents in different fields, and that's probably quite a tough sort of onerous burden to take on in life with two very successful parents. And as Emily says, all families have their tensions, and so I hope it's all resolved. I think the Beckhams have played it very well and said very little, and that would be my advice to them.
No, I'm not so sure. I think their press teams have been pretty active from what I can see.
They've suddenly become active. Yeah, I think there was an awful lot of detail given to Katie Hind, and I think that is going to massively stoke it. And I think they should have continued to have kept extremely quiet. But I get it, because what was said in that Instagram to someone like Victoria Beckham, this is I've been into the Beckham's house. I've seen them as a family operate. They are incredibly family orientated. They are incredibly goal driven. This is a family that operates on a sort of high level. So I think it's a real tragedy that this has happened, and this escalating on both sides, and that holding of that second marriage. I'm sorry, that was like literally firing a shot straight at the heart of your own parents. So my blame is slightly at the Peltzers at the moment.
Yeah, has your son got married?
No, and no. I will do. Believe me, I'm the same. I will stand out of making anything, but I will lay down to the wife so that I stay in the family.
Would you elbow in on his first dance?
No, but did that actually happen?
We haven't seen the video.
The reports are that all the children were up on the stage. It wasn't just Victoria. It was just like and that they had already had their dance. So. The wife was taken. The new wife was taken off in floods of tears. This is all new detail we are learning. But we're never going to stop this toing and froing and back and forward. And my own experience of when I've had rows within my own family, which of course you do with either your parents or your siblings, is go quiet, let time pass, and it will heal. But they've gone nuclear, and I think it's going to be just like Harry did. It's going to be really, really hard to row back from it.
All right, just time for the Sunday Times exclusive that Ruth Davidson and Andy Street are heading up a group to reform the Conservative Party, bring it back to the centre. Do you fancy their chances, Emily?
I think my concern is I've got huge admiration for both of them. I really like Ruth Davidson. Andy was the most incredible mayor. I was very sad when he lost that role. But what I worry from just looking at what Andy Street put out today is that, yes, they're absolutely saying we've got to focus on being pro-enterprise, pro-business, in the centre. Yes, that is always been a pillar of the Conservatives, but that is not the only things that the public are worried about at the moment. Immigration is still incredibly high. Cost of living is still a huge problem. Law and order and defence have also been key Tory planks.